Welcome to this visual explainer. Today, we're embarking on a pretty magnificent journey across Anatolia. And we're not just looking at a bunch of rocks and elevations here, we are exploring the literal bedrock of human history. This is the birthplace of agriculture, and honestly, the high-altitude stage for some of our oldest myths. So whether you're a hardcore geography buff, a history nerd, or you just really appreciate a good map, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's get into it.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the foundations of geography, move eastward to the massive peaks and central volcanoes, check out the Taurus Mountains, sweep across the Aegean and Black Sea ranges, and finally wrap up with the historic heights of Marmara.
All right, Section 1, Foundations of Geography. First up, we've got orogenesis, or more simply, fold mountains. Imagine immense tectonic pressure squeezing flexible sedimentary rock. Instead of breaking, it actually compresses and folds, creating these vast, sweeping mountain ranges. The raised ridges, those are called anticlines, and the valleys dipped in between are synclines. It's kind of like pushing a rug from both ends. This specific folding process is exactly what gave us the massive, continuous chains of the Taurus and North Anatolian mountains.
Now, in stark contrast to that folding, what happens when the Earth's crust is made of hard, inflexible rock? Well, under pressure, it doesn't fold, it snaps. This creates a horse-graben system, also known as fault block mountains. The Earth literally fractures. Massive blocks of rock are thrust upward, those are your horsts, or the mountains, while other blocks sink down to form deep, wide valleys, called grabens. This broken, alternating landscape is the architectural secret behind the super fertile, valley-rich terrain we're going to see in the Aegean region. And finally, there's karst topography. Now, this isn't about mountains being pushed up or broken apart. This is about mountains being dissolved. Over millions of years, water chemically eats away at easily soluble rocks like limestone and gypsum. The result is this crazy Swiss cheese landscape full of deep canyons, underground rivers, and massive sinkholes. Keep this in the back of your mind, because when we hit the Mediterranean coast later on, karst topography is the absolute master sculptor of that land. Moving right along to Section 2, Eastern and Southeastern Peaks. Heading all the way up to the roof of Anatolia, just look at the sheer scale of these eastern giants. Mount Agri is an absolute monster, towering at over 5,100 meters. It's a dormant stratovolcano topped with Turkey's largest ice cap. Then you have Mount Sufan, sitting just over 4,000 meters, which was quite literally worshipped as a sacred site by the ancient Urartu civilization. And hey, don't let Mount Nemrut's lower elevation fool you. It holds the second largest volcanic caldera, or explosion crater, in the entire world, complete with its own internal crater lake and hot springs. Unbelievable, right? Mount Agri isn't just a geological wonder, though. It carries some serious cultural weight. Known in the West as Mount Ararat, it's revered in Abrahamic religions as the legendary resting place of Noah's Ark. In fact, when the famous explorer Marco Polo traveled through this region, he was so struck by its icy, imposing dominance that he just jotted it down in his journals as an unclimbable mountain. I mean, it is the perfect example of how extreme geography just commands human reverence. But, not all volcanoes build terrifying, unscalable peaks. Down in the southeast, we find Karakadog. This one is a shield volcano. Instead of exploding violently upward, it oozed out this fluid basaltic lava that just spread over the landscape like a massive wide shield. And this brilliantly illustrates the connection between the Earth and our history. That incredibly rich, nutrient-dense volcanic soil became the perfect incubator for early civilization. Genetic research actually shows that the wild ancestor of inkhorn, the world's very first cultivated wheat, grew right here on these slopes. Geology literally planted the seeds of agriculture.
Up next, Section 3, Volcanoes of Central Anatolia. When you think of Central Anatolia, you probably pictured the magical fairy chimneys of Cappadocia, right? Well, you can thank Mount Hasan and Mount Erciyes for those. Millions of years ago, these volcanoes blanketed the region in thick layers of ash, or tuff, which wind and water eventually carved into those famous stone pillars. And these mountains have been watching over humanity forever. A mural found in the ancient settlement of Catalhoyuk, which is widely considered the world's oldest map, actually shows Mount Hasan erupting. Meanwhile, the towering Mount Erciyes was so dominant that the mighty Hittite Empire literally revered it as the sacred mountain.
Let's head south for Section 4, Taurus, Shield of the Mediterranean.
Tucked within the Middle Taurus Range lies the Ala Daglar,
This is a rugged, violently carved section of peaks that is practically a playground for extreme sports. Thanks to that karst topography we talked about earlier, combined with ancient glacial carving, this area is hands down Turkey's capital for rock climbing and alpinism. It is packed with deep, echoing canyons, pristine, high-altitude glacial lakes on the Yedigolar Plateau, and the roaring Kapuzbazi waterfalls. Seriously, these waterfalls look like they just burst right out of the solid rock face. But it's not all adrenaline and extreme sports. These mountains are an absolute ecological fortress. High up in the Bulkar Mountains, the extreme isolation has created completely unique pockets of life. Take Kargol, for example, or Black Lake. It is literally the only place on Earth where you will find the completely silent Taurus frog. It's just a beautiful reminder of how high mountain ranges can create these tiny, isolated ecosystems found nowhere else on the planet. On to Section 5, Aegean and Black Sea ranges. Now take a good look at this comparison, because it basically explains the entire economic and climatic reality of Turkey's coastlines. On the Aegean side, we've got those snapped, broken horst mountains running perpendicular at right angles to the sea. Because of this, the warm, wet marine climate can travel deep inland through the valleys, creating lush agricultural havens. But up on the Black Sea, the mountains are folded, and they run strictly parallel to the coast, like a massive wall. This completely blocks the coastal weather from moving south, trapping intense rainfall right on the coast and leaving the interior way drier. Down on the Aegean coast sits Mount Ida, known today as Kazdaga. This horst mountain is heavily forested and boasts some of the highest oxygen levels in the world. But it's also absolutely steeped in myth. This is the very mountain where the gods supposedly sat back, watched the battles of Homer's Iliad. According to legend, it was also the site of the Judgment of Paris. That's essentially the world's first and definitely most disastrous beauty pageant, which ultimately triggered the entire Trojan War. Moving north to the Black Sea coast, remember that solid wall of parallel mountains I just mentioned? Well, there's a weak point. Right in the middle sit the Kanik Mountains, dropping down to a relatively low altitude of just 1,500 meters. Because this barrier suddenly dips, the marine climate is finally able to push inland. Even more importantly, it allows rivers to easily reach the sea, which creates massive, incredibly fertile coastal deltas. It's crazy how just a slight change in elevation can completely alter the map. Further east along the Black Sea, though, the mountains rise back up with a vengeance. The Kikar Mountains are a fiercely folded range hitting nearly 4,000 meters. They're so massive they actually still hold active valley glaciers today. Because of the insane vertical drops in deep snow, it's a huge, world-renowned destination for hell skiing. But it is also a cultural stronghold. It's home to the deep-rooted Laws and Hemsin people who maintain a really vibrant highland culture right up there among the misty peaks and dense forests. Finally, Section 6, Historic Heights of Marmara. Towering over the Marmara region is Uludağ. It's Turkey's premier winter sports destination. But what's really fascinating here is its geology. I mean, it looks exactly like a volcano, but it never actually erupted. It is what's called a batholith. Millions of years ago, a massive chamber of magma rose toward the surface, but got trapped deep underground. So it just sat there, cooling slowly over millennia into incredibly hard rock. Eventually, all the softer earth above it was stripped away by erosion, exposing this giant solid plug of cooled magma to the sky. Nature is wild. Because it so heavily dominates the landscape, its identity has actually shifted along with the empires that ruled it. Back in antiquity, it was called Bithynia Olympos. Then, during the Ottoman era, because of the many monasteries hidden on its slopes, it was known as Kisis Dağı, or Monk Mountain. It actually wasn't until the early days of the Turkish Republic in 1925 that it got officially renamed to Uludağ, which simply means Great Mountain. Wrapping up our geographic tour, we look to the Yildiz, or Istronka, mountains near the Bulgarian border. These are ancient, heavily worn massifs. Now, they might not have the towering, jagged peaks of the Kakars, but they perform a totally vital, silent duty. They act as the crucial water source and physical shield for the Ignadad floodplain forests on the coast. That is a rare, absolutely magical ecosystem where dense forests grow straight out of flooded waters. From the folded ridges that block the coastal rains, to the fractured blocks that welcome the Aegean breeze, and those cooled volcanic giants that literally birthed the first crops of humanity, Anatolia isn't just some static place on a map. It is a dynamic, living structure. So, looking at this incredible topography, which of these peaks, where history, legends, and nature all intersect, is going to be your next adventure? Thanks so much for exploring with us today.